Hi, this is Mike McCrease, and welcome once again to Advanced Photoshop. And today we're going to take a look at some portrait retouching techniques, professional portrait retouching techniques, that will serve you well in the workplace. To begin with, we're going to start out with this picture called wrinkles.jpg, which I've downloaded from Blackboard. And it's really a pretty good shot as far as the composition, the pose, the lighting is really good. But what we want to do is, portray this woman in her best light. We all want to look our best in a photograph, and we're going to help her out a little bit by removing some wrinkles on her forehead, underneath her eyes, and other minor blemishes to make her look her very best. Now, to begin my retouching project, I'll open up my Layers panel, and I'm going to copy my background layer. I'm going to be doing some repair work on the copied layer, but I'm also going to later on use portions of the background layer. So I'm going to copy this layer by pressing Control, Alternate, and J, or Command Option J on the Macintosh, and I'm going to give this a name of Retouch. And there's my copied layer with a new name. Now let's press J on the keyboard, and that's going to take us to our healing brush tool set. And you can click and hold down on that healing brush tool to find all the tools that are underneath it. I've got the spot healing brush tool, the healing brush tool, and the patch tool, all three of which we're going to use on this first part of the assignment. Underneath that, we've got the content aware move tool, which we've explored already, and we've got the red eye tool, which removes red eye. I think everybody's probably familiar with that, and so we don't really think we need to cover that. It's a real quick and easy way to remove red eye in picture. But let's go and use our healing brush tool. And another way to go through the different tools that are hidden underneath there is if I hold down the Shift key and then press the keyboard shortcut, then it will cycles through. So in this case here, I just press Shift J and it cycles through all the different retouching tools. I'm going to choose the healing brush tool, not the spot healing brush tool. And the healing brush tool shows a little icon of a band-aid there. And with our healing brush tool selected, let's go to our brush presets at the top. I'll click this little drop-down menu, and here we can choose our brush size, the hardness, the spacing, and the angle and the roundness. Let's start first of all by showing you that in this little brush size box right here that I can click and drag the angle of that brush around, and I can change the shape of it as well. This allows me to get into tighter corners and to make brush strokes that will be less visible. Let's go ahead and set the angle to 60 degrees, and the roundness, I'm going to set that at 60%. The spacing I'll leave set it as it is. And the hardness, let's drop that down to about 75%. And the size, let's try 25 pixels. I think that will do nicely. I press Return to accept those settings. Now I'm going to zoom in, Control or Command plus, and let's move in close to her forehead, where you can see things nice and clear. And we're going to remove some of these wrinkles on her forehead. And I'm going to hold down my alternate key or option on the Macintosh, and I'm going to then left click on a clear area of her forehead where there are no blemishes or wrinkles. And then I'll move over to where those wrinkles are, and I'm just going to click and release, or click and just drag a short ways. This is going to work best if we just make really short brush strokes. Actually, I think I'm going to drop my brush size down a bit. Let's bring that down to maybe 10 pixels. And let's just erase those wrinkles across her forehead. Okay, let's move over to the side and take care of some other areas. Now I'm in a darker part of the skin tone, so I'm going to Alt or Option click in that area, nice clean area, and then click and drag over the wrinkles there. Because what it's doing is it's blending pixels from where I target it from into the areas where I'm clicking and dragging. And they're going to blend very nicely that way and get rid of any imperfections that might be present. Okay, that's done pretty well. Now let's go ahead and move down to the bridge of her nose where we have a few more wrinkles and we got some large pores. So let's clean those up as well. Again, I'll Alt or Option click in a clean part of the skin and then just paint over those areas. And again, short strokes are going to work best, or just clicking and releasing. And we just clean all those up. I think I can use a slightly larger brush stroke at this point. So I'll just increase my brush size a little bit. And we'll just move on down the picture. Over on her nose, we see there's a little blemish right there on the side of her nose. So I'm going to Alt Option click over here and click there to remove that. And any other imperfections we'll take care of. If I make a mistake like I did just there, just press Control or Command Z to undo that. Now we're not going to worry about these big wrinkles under her eyes. We're going to use a different technique there. We're just looking for minor changes to make. Any age spots on her cheeks we can get rid of, we'll do that. There's some pores over on her cheek we probably ought to eliminate. Maybe a few on her nose as well. Move down to her chin and just continue the process. And on the side of the face. Now over here, let's just go ahead and get down to the chin here before we get on something new. Let's just go ahead and kind of clean up down here on her chin. And let's take a look at the other side of the face. It's looking pretty good there. Now over here on her neck, we see some stray hairs. We're not going to get rid of all those, but some of those are a little obnoxious, so we'll just get rid of those as well. Down to her neck, we see we've got a number of age spots and some wrinkles there. Let's get rid of those. Now you can also try using the spot healing brush tool. The spot healing brush tool, what it does is it picks pixels from the area surrounding where you click, and then it blends those surrounding pixels in to the part that you're retouching. So you don't have to do the alternate clicking here. So you might try that, see which of those works best for you in a given situation. And if things don't look right, just undo them and try it again. Now over here on her dress, you see there's some dust spots over there, so I can just use the spot healing brush tool to clean those things up. And we'll do a once over just to make certain we got all of the minor blemishes taken care of here. Okay, so that part's done. Now I'm going to address the large wrinkles underneath and around her eyes. I'll go back to my layers panel, and I'm going to copy my retouch layer. Control, Alternate, and J, and we're going to call this eye patch. Maybe we should call it eye repair, might be a little more descriptive. And on this layer, I am going to go to my healing brush tool set, and I'll choose the patch tool. And with the patch tool, I'm going to click and lasso in a selection around her eyes, around the wrinkles there. Just going to lasso that in like that. Make a selection. Let me zoom out here just a little bit so we can see what I'm going to do next. I'm then going to move my cursor inside that selected area and click and drag that over to her forehead, which now is free of blemishes, and then I will let go of the mouse. And what it has done, it has taken this selected area and blended the forehead pixels into that area right there. I deselect, no more wrinkles. Let's do the same thing on the other side. Using the patch tool, we just click and drag a selection just like you would with the lasso tool. Like that. Then I click and drag that selection to a clear part of her forehead. Deselect, and she's wrinkle free. We got one problem here. Our goal here is not to make her look like she's 17 years old. Our goal is just to kind of minimize the wrinkles. We don't want to look like we've done plastic surgery on her. So back in my layers panel, I'll go to the eye repair layer, which I just worked on, and I will reduce my layer opacity until some of those wrinkles come back. And you can kind of decide for yourself, but probably setting the opacity at about 50% would be pretty accurate. There's before, there's after. The wrinkles are still there. Like I say, we're not trying to make her look like a mannequin. We just kind of want to de-emphasize those wrinkles. And I think she would be really proud of this picture. Now before I call it quits on this picture, I see one more problem I would like to address, and that is her eyebrow. It'd be her left eyebrow, the one on our right, it looks like it has been a little over tweezed over here. So we're going to repair that. This is a quick and easy job. I'm going to go to my lasso tool. I prefer to use the polygonal lasso tool because it gives me a little more control. And I'm going to set my feathering at 5 pixels. And I'm going to lasso in a portion of her eyebrow that is nice and full. I'm going to copy that to a new layer. I'll call that Eyebrow Repair. Then I'll go to my free transform tool and I will move that over to that bare spot. And notice too that when I copy that layer, my layer opacity was still at 50%, so I'm going to pull that up to 100% and reposition the eyebrow. And I can rotate it in place. Commit to that. Doesn't look great right now, but I'm going to change the blending mode of the Eyebrow Repair layer to darken. And now it blends in pretty well. The only thing that I might want to do is mask off the lower part a little bit. I think it's a little too thick down the bottom, so I can simply create a layer mask for that. And using my paintbrush and black paint, I'll just mask that part off of there. Here we go. Okay, so that's before and there's after. Now I think we're done with this portrait. So let's save that one and start on our next one. Okay, here's my next picture. It's called Shave JPEG. And let's zoom in and take a look at this fella. He's a little scruffy. It looks like he's got, about a 1 or 2 day beard going on there. So we're actually going to kind of clean him up, do a little bit of shaving on him. Remove this mole over here and remove some of these finer wrinkles. And you notice too that he's missing a few teeth, so we're going to replace all those, play digital orthodontist here, and make him look pretty good. Okay, so let's start out by opening up our layers panel, and just as before, we're going to copy this layer, Control Alternate J or Command Option J, and we're going to call this one Dust and Scratches, because we're going to use that filter on it again. Now I'm going to be smart here and convert this to a smart object first. So I'm going to right click on that layer and choose Convert to Smart Object. Then I'll go to my filter menu and choose Noise, Dust and Scratches. Let's take the threshold slider, drag it all the way to the left, and the radius slider as well. Then I'm going to move that radius slider just a little bit to the right until we start to lose some of that razor stubble on his chin. I think that if we choose a radius of 2 pixels, that's going to give us a nice soft blur here without it getting too soft. And then we'll take our threshold slider and we're going to drag that to the right just until we get that razor stubble start to reappear. And you can drag this all the way to the left and to the right and see what happens. But I'm thinking if you set the threshold to about 20 levels, it'll look pretty decent. And so I'm going to click OK. Now, of course, when I applied that Dust and Scratches filter, it kind of softened up the entire image. So what I'm going to do is paint in some sharpness. Here's how I'll do that. I'm going to apply a layer mask to the dust and scratches. Now ordinarily I would just click on the Add Layer Mask button and it would create a layer that's filled with white. This time I'm going to hold down the Alt or Option key and then click it. And when you hold down the Alt or Option key and create the layer mask, it fills it with black. In other words, it masks off all of my dust and scratches that I just put on. So what I'll do next is go to my paintbrush tool. I'm going to go to white paint. Increase my brush size and increase the brush softness, and just paint over the parts of his face where we want to reduce all that fine detail. So we're actually painting the filter back into the image. Adjust your brush size as necessary. And I've got it set at the brush opacity set at 50% so I can go back and put an additional brush stroke on top of that. It gives me a little more control about over how sharp I want the image to be. And so you can see if you look at the layer thumbnail, we're painting in, wherever it's white, we're painting in that softness that we had put on with that dust and scratches filter. And basically looks like we're shaving him, giving him a little shave there. So we can remove some of these minor scratches and all that razor stubble up there. Let's go around his eyes there as well. Just to kind of soften up some of those wrinkles a little bit. Okay. Now this little mole kind of bothers me here. So I'm going to take care of that. Our layer is currently a smart object, so I'm going to have to double click on that. That will take us inside the smart object. And I'll use my spot healing brush tool to take care of that. Save the file. This is the PSB file, and close it. We've taken care of that. Now if you like, you can turn off your background layer to see the part of the dust and scratches layer that's visible. All these parts right here, these are the parts where we have softened up the image and painted that softness back in. All the sharp part is on our background layer showing through. Okay, now let's do a little bit of dental work on this fella. Let's zoom in here to his mouth and make certain that the dust and scratches layer thumbnail is selected and not the mask. You'll see the little corner handle or corner frames appear around it. And then I'm going to go to my quick selection tool and I'm going to select this tooth right over here. You want to make certain that you get enough of the tooth that it goes into the gum line a little bit. And let's choose Refine Edge, and let's feather that just a little bit. Maybe, probably about 1 pixel would do the trick. And then I'm going to copy this onto a new layer. Command Option J. We're going to call this Incisor. And then I go to my Move tool, and we're going to move that copied tooth over here to the side. Now I don't want it to look like a copy, so I'll free transform it, scale it down just a little bit, and then I will right click inside and choose Warp. I'll zoom in so you can see a little bit better here. And what we're going to do is warp this tool. I can click and drag these corner handles or these control arms and just reshape the tooth so that it doesn't look so much like an exact copy. Press return, go to my move tool, move that up there, and you may have to mask off or erase a little part of it. Actually, I think this is okay, but if it's overlapping the other tooth too much, you might want to mask that off. Now I think I'll probably make this tooth a little bit darker as well. So I'll create an adjustment layer for levels, and we're going to darken it. Oops, what I forgot to do is clip it to that incisor layer. So what I can do is press this little button right here, and that clips it to that layer, and this way it only affects that layer. And I'm just taking this mid-tone slider and dragging that to the right a little bit, just to make it a little bit darker, because we want our teeth to go from bright up front to a little bit darker here and then darker as they go back into his mouth. Now let's take this molar over here, make a copy of that, and use that to fill up this blank space over here. So back to our dust and scratches layer. And I'm thinking, due to the darkness of that tooth, that instead of using the quick selection tool, I'm going to use the polygonal lasso tool and select this tooth. Now I see one mistake here. I see up here at the top, I've got my feathering set to 5 pixels because when I last used the polygonal lasso tool, I had feathered that out 5 pixels. I'm just going to go ahead, drop that down to 1 pixel, and then go ahead and select the tooth. If I had left it at 5 pixels, you'd have a super fuzzy edge, what would look really bad. Okay, the tooth is selected. We're going to copy that to a new layer. I'll call that molar. Use my move tool. Move it up over here. Free transform it a little bit, just like we did with the other tooth. Just so it doesn't look like an exact copy. And I'll create an adjustment layer for levels. Clip it to my new tooth layer. And this time we're going to brighten this one up a little bit. That's probably about right. Now we've got one other tooth that needs to be replaced, and there's a place over here where he's lost a tooth. So I'm going to take this eye tooth right here, copy that over there. Again, I'll use the polygonal lasso tool and make certain that I'm on the dust and scratches layer, and we're going to select that tooth. And we're going to put that on a new layer. I'll call it eye tooth. Use my move tool. Move it into position like that. Free transform it. I think I'll warp it this time. Right click and choose warp. And we'll change the shape of that tooth. just a bit. And I'm making it fit in right next to that tooth so it doesn't overlap it. There we go. Got a nice set of teeth. Okay, so let's save and close this one. On our third picture, this is the Blend If Sliders JPEG image. And again, it's a pretty nice picture, but it's nothing really exceptional. Lighting's a little bit flat, so we need to correct that. And we're going to kind of give her entire skin a nice new glow using a layering technique, which are called the Blend If Sliders. So just like before, we're going to copy this background layer, and I'm going to call it Blur. Let's convert the blurred layer to a smart object. Right-click on the layer and choose Convert to Smart Object. Then we're going to blur it. Let's choose Filter and Blur and choose the Gaussian blur filter. And you can drag the slider to the left and to the right to see the effect, just how you control your blur. This is one of my favorite blur filters because it does such a nice job. But let's stop and set this at about 10 pixels and click OK. Now obviously it blurred the entire picture, but I'm going to correct that just by changing my blend mode from normal to overlay. And as soon as I do that, a couple of things happen here. Actually, three things have happened. You see an increase in color saturation, you see an increase in contrast, and you see that the highlights and the whole skin has kind of a nice glow to it. But it's a little bit on the strong side. Now this is where our Blend If sliders come into play, because with this layering technique, what it does is it lightens up these shadows, or actually masks off these shadows, I should say, so that the lighter shadows from the background layer show through the mask. And then it allows you to kind of blend the two layers together. So with your blur layer active, let's go down to your effects button, and we're going to choose blending options. And this huge panel opens up. Now another way I can make that panel appear is just by double clicking in a blank area on this layer, and that opens up the panel. So either way will suffice. I'm just going to move this off to the side a little bit so that we can see our picture. Let me do this for just a second. I'm going to move this picture further off to the left so that you can see a little bit better. And these are my Blend If sliders down here at the bottom. Now I'm going to leave the Blend If option set to gray, and we've got two sliders, one for this layer and one for the underlying layer. It's this layer that I'm going to be working with, and I'm going to take this this little shadow slider right here, and I'm going to drag it off to the right, and you're going to see those shadows open up. Now it doesn't give us a very smooth transition, but let me, just for right now, I'm going to click on OK, and then I will turn off my background layer, and you can see what it's doing. It's actually creating a layer mask, so that the top part is where it's nice and blurry. That's the part of my blur layer that's being revealed, and when I turn on my background layer, that's the unaltered image showing through. Now, of course, like I said, you've got these really harsh transitions. We're going to go ahead and repair that. So I'm going to open up my blending options once again. Now let's go back into the blend ifs sliders, and I'm going to drag this shadow slider up to a value of 150. Now to soften the transition edges of the mask and the background layer, I'm going to go back to this shadow slider right here, and I'm going to hold down my alternate or option key and click on the left side of that slider, and that splits it in half. And then I'm going to drag it, and you also see that your setting has been split in half. I'm going to drag it back to the left until that setting is at 50. Now these are starting points to work with, and your settings will be different based on the picture that you're working with. But for this image, it works pretty well. Okay, so now I can just click on OK, and you can toggle off your blur layer to see before and after. And you see how nice the contrast is. Color's a little more saturated, and you have that nice glow to the skin. Now, we set the blending mode to overlay. You could have also chosen soft light, and it will be a little bit lower contrast. So again, if you're using an image which is higher contrast, or I mean the one we started out was pretty low, but if you're working with a normal or a higher contrast image, you might try setting that to soft light. But on this image here, I think overlay is going to work best for us. And turn off your background layer to see the effective mask. We didn't actually create a mask. You see there is no mask over here, but in effect we created a mask just by blending in the shadows from the top layer to the bottom layer. And if my saturation is still too intense, I could of course create an adjustment layer for hue and saturation to pull those colors up or down. And I could also lower the layer opacity if I think the effect is too strong. Again, in this particular picture, I think it looks pretty good as it is, but those are just some other options that you might consider when you're working on a different image. And this is a technique that's used a lot in portraiture, school pictures, wedding picture assignments like that. So again, this is something you want to keep in your little bag of Photoshop tricks. So let's save and close this file. Here's our fourth and final image to work with. It's stretch.jpg. Again, it's a nice portrait, but this is a technique that's used a lot in the fashion and advertising business, to where you want to make your subject look taller and thinner. And you might think, well, that's an easy thing to do. All you would do is use the free transform tool and stretch the picture up. But if you do that, it's going to distort it and make it look pretty bad. For example, if I go to my free transform tool, and let me zoom out here just a little bit. Well, I have to unlock my background layer first. And if I use the free transform tool, I stretch it. You see what it does to the image. It stretches her head and makes it look very unnatural. So here's a better way of doing that. Let's copy our background layer. And we're going to call this layer stretch. Now I'm going to go ahead and use my free transform tool. I'll press Control or Command T, and we're going to set the width up here in my width field to 97%. And I'm going to set my height to 110%. And press return. You have to press it a couple of times. And so see now that she is taller and thinner. But of course, as I mentioned before, it kind of distorts the face. So to correct that distortion, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy the head from my background layer to a new layer and blend that in with my stretch image. So let's go to our rectangular marquee tool, and we're going to drag a selection over the head like this down to her shoulders, and then I'll go back to my background layer. Now mine says layer 0 because I had unlocked it to do a transformation earlier, but go to your background layer and we're going to press Command Alternate J to copy that onto a new layer. We'll call it head. And then I will drag my head layer to the top of the layer stack so that it is on top of the stretch image. And you can see now the head is normally sized. Now if I zoom in or look closely, you'll see that that there's a little bit of a problem at the top where the edge of the head layer starts, and then down here on her shoulders where it meets the shoulders of the stretch image. So I'm going to go to my head layer and I'm going to make a layer mask for it. And then making certain that I've got black as my foreground color, I'll choose my paintbrush. I'll choose a larger brush and a soft edge brush. Set my opacity to 100%, and we're just going to mask off that portion up there. Just to kind of blend those edges in. Now you want to be careful. See, if I get down too low, I start picking up the head from the stretch layer. So if that happens, you have to switch to white paint, use a smaller brush, and paint that back out. So you want to be careful about that. And then down over here on her shoulders, back to black paint. And we just kind of paint those edges so that it blends in. Now we got two straps on her shoulder. We want to take care of that. And there you have the newly adjusted head on the body. Now let's take this a step further and trim a little bit of weight off of her waist. This is another popular fashion and advertising technique. I'm going to kind of zoom in a little bit to her waist and make certain that you're on the stretch layer. And we're going to go to Filter and Liquify. This very large options panel appears, and yours might look like this, which is fine just as it is, but you could also click on the Advanced Mode button right here, and I can turn on Show Mesh. This is optional. It's not necessary, but I'll show you what it's going to do for us. And I'm going to choose the mesh size, set that to large. And I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. And over here in my toolbox, I'm going to choose the Push Left tool. And I can adjust my brush size up a little bit. And I'm going to click and drag up with just the tip of the brush touching her waist. What I'm doing is I'm pushing this grid to the left, and the grid acts like magnets for the pixels, and so it's shoving those pixels to the left. Again, I don't have to have that grid on there, but it just kind of illustrates what this is doing. So I'm just going to very subtly just trim a little bit of weight off of her tummy there. And then click OK. And so there's before image, and there's after. Now, just as one final step to complete this picture, when we transformed the image and made it narrower, you see that there's a little part of the picture there that is hanging off the edges. So we need to crop this picture down just a little bit. So I'll use my crop tool. And we will just drag that down just a little bit there. Bring it in on the sides just a little bit, and off the top and bottom, just to get rid of that overlapping part. Okay, does that make sense? So send all those files to me on Blackboard, and we'll move on to more portrait retouching techniques in our next lesson. Thanks again. This is Mike McCrease.